cornflakes, obviously. Every bowl makes me want to knock one off. Then, um, bran flakes, isn't it? Got to keep things regular. Oh, what's that other one? Uh, uh, yeah, the one that keeps dentists in business. Frosted Flakes. And that, of course, reminds me of snowflakes, the cereal of choice for right-wing Christian conservatives, because boy oh boy do those cunts get offended by absolutely everything so easily. Oh, hello, dear viewer. You caught me doing one of my favourite things, listing off various kinds of cereal. I suppose I should be doing the podcast. Welcome everybody. I am the air quotes comedian, a man who doesn't eat cereal anymore because soy milk sucks, and this is the Polemics. Welcome to my vagina. That's the first line in an advertisement that's currently running on television. Now, I only mention this because of my wife's reaction to the advert, which was a mixture of outrage and disgust. How dare they say the word vagina on daytime television? What if a child was watching? You get the idea. I don't quite get what the problem is myself. It's not like the lady in the advert said, "Welcome to my cunt." If she'd said that, I'd be all ears. Fuck me, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the product you're hawking. My wallet is at the ready. I asked my wife, what if a child was watching? What of it? She was like, saying the word vagina on daytime television isn't appropriate for children. I was like, so how should children refer to their genitals?
Mummy, my hoo-hoo itches, and every time I scratch it, the teacher calls me a dirty birdie. Or, Mummy, my pee-pee got hard in class because some little girl was rubbing her. I have no idea what to call it because apparently accurate anatomical labels for certain body parts are taboo until you reach a certain age of maturity. So when I went to report Mr. Pedo Pants for putting his banana in my chocolate fudge dispenser, the headmaster just patted me on the head and told me to go to class. I'm pretty sure the headmaster would have had a completely different reaction if I'd had the correct terminology at my disposal, but I suppose it's not appropriate for me, a young child, to be able to correctly identify my own body parts. I'm firmly of the opinion that you shouldn't get to use euphemisms for your jollies until you're an adult. Let's cast our minds back to the distant past. No, our destination isn't the 1980s this time. Yeah, I know, makes a change, doesn't it? Anyway, let's cast our minds back to the year 2006. The year everybody was sad because the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin, died. It was the year Saddam Hussein was executed, and everybody was really sad because Steve Irwin had died. And it was the year the HPV vaccine was approved by the FDA. HPV is a relatively benign STD, but it can increase the risk of cancer. So, the obvious thing to do is to vaccinate children before they become sexually active. Unless, of course, you're a Christian conservative. There was, I shit you not, a furor following a push from public health officials to vaccinate pre-teen children. If you can imagine such a thing happening, Republican politicians expressed outrage that kiddies should be vaccinated. What about the children? That's what Christian conservatives like to say, isn't it? What about the children? Well, in this case, it was, let the whoring little tykes potentially die from something that's easily preventable because we hate sex and refuse to accept that our kids might get it on, maybe even before puberty arrives. Why is it that Christian conservatives hate their children and want them to have horrible lives? They do, though. Their idea of sex ed is to solely teach abstinence, which is why teen pregnancy is sky high and sexually transmitted diseases are rampant. I, for one, am sick of Christians pushing their twisted and immoral agenda down our throats. And they do it all the time, like drug pushers, except what they're pushing isn't fun at all. For example, last week I was walking through town with my 6-year-old nephew. We were on our way to join a Black Lives Matter protest when suddenly we turned a corner and there was a church.
I quickly shielded my nephew's eyes and was enraged that these people, these abominations of nature, should be allowed to flagrantly push their agenda onto young children without any notion of parental consent. Shocking. Look, I don't mind these religious types existing, but they should keep their activities private, right? I mean, what about the children? It's bad enough that these throwbacks exist without pushing their symbols onto impressionable young minds. Instead of readily definable architecture, such as steeples and crosses, they should just have an anonymous, nondescript building that looks like a defunct storage locker facility. I do worry, though, that these religious types can go around proselytizing to anybody they please. What the actual fuck? These disgusting aberrations are free to move around willy-nilly. What's up with that? No, no, no. What about the children? What if one of those Bible thumpers was working in a school? Imagine that! The horror! I think, at the very least, there should be some kind of registry for these despicable and evil people, if, indeed, they really are people. Last week I was watching television with my 6-year-old nephew, flicking through the channels to find the postmodern radical intersectional feminist documentary that we wanted to watch, when suddenly there was a televangelist doing a sermon. I quickly shielded my nephew's eyes with my fingers and blocked his ears with my thumbs, and was absolutely livid that these walking sacks of shit were allowed to spew their twisted ideology on basic cable where children might be able to see it, without their parents even knowing about it. Outrageous! I don't object to these religious types being on television, but surely the cable company could scramble the signal for decency's sake. Not, because they're behind a paywall or anything. Just scramble the fucking signal. We don't want that kind of filth being beamed directly into our homes. What about the children? It's bad enough that these regressives exist without pushing their religious programs onto malleable young minds. Instead of access to the television airwaves with easily definable programming content, they should just have an anonymous, nondescript building that looks like a defunct storage locker facility, where they can sell DVDs of their sermons and such, but that shit had better be covered up in a brown paper bag when people leave the building. I do fret, though, that these religious types can get on TV to preach to anybody they please. What the actual fuck? These awful monsters are free to occupy valuable channel space. What's up with that? No, no, no. What about the children? What if an unattended child accidentally tuned in to a televangelist? Imagine that! The humanity! I think, at the very least, these religious zealots should be rounded up and put into one secure location. It's the least we should do. Last week, my 6-year-old nephew and I were in the car, headed to Chicago to attend a pride parade. Well, we both needed a wee, so I stopped at the services. We were in the toilet, weeing into the urinals, and suddenly a priest walked in. I quickly shielded my nephew's eyes and ears and put my groin against his bum to prevent, I was apoplectic that this priest, this deviant of nature, should be allowed to enter a non-priest bathroom to push their toxic agenda, and perhaps other things, onto young children without parental consent. Unbelievable. I don't mind these priests existing, but they should keep to their own bathrooms. I mean, what about the children? It's bad enough that these proto-humans exist without pushing their religious dress code onto impressionable young minds. Instead of readily identifiable religious uniforms, they should just have anonymous, nondescript plain clothes that evokes the sense of a defunct storage locker facility. I do worry, though, that these priests can go around priesting to anybody they please. What the actual fuck? These slimy sickbags are free to go into toilets where children are present. What's up with that? No, no, no. What about the children? What if one of those priests pulled his cock out and had a wee? Imagine that! The terror of it! I think, at the very least, that priests, and indeed all religious people, should be rounded up and fed to the lions. That's the end of this episode of the Polemics. Be sure to hit the dislike button and then go burn down a defunct storage locker facility.